So with those two, when it is a good option, when it's not a good option for you, if you decide that it's a good option for you based on what I just discussed, then the next thing that you want to look at is, do you want to hold a long-term rental or do you want to hold a short-term rental? And I'm not talking about the length of time that you own it, but I'm talking about the length of time that you rented it in a given period of time. So long-term rentals, pros and cons real quick. Pros are you typically have a predictable cash flow. That can be considered stable income because typically you're going to have a 1-year lease. You know what that fixed payment is going to be for a year. You should have a pretty good idea of what your fixed costs are over that same year period. So you're going to have some pretty stable, hopefully, profit there. So you know what your numbers are. Not a lot of risk there unless you end up with somebody who has to leave within that year's time. They're breaking a lease. They're going to pay a penalty for that, or you're going to keep their deposit, or however you negotiate that. But for the most part, that 1-year term is going to be very helpful. Typically, because of the 1-year nature, you're going to have lower turnover rates. So hopefully you have a tenant who stays for a year, and if they stay for a year, maybe they stay for 2, and if they stay for 2, they get comfortable. Maybe they stay for 4 or 5 or whatever. If it's the right tenant, then that's a great scenario because then you know what you're working with. But low turnover can be very helpful for you as the property owner. When you have a long-term rental and there's less changes in your tenants, you tend to have lower management cost and management issues because typically you know the people, you know their stability of payment. You're probably not worried about having to deal with court cost or evictions or chasing down, payments every month or things like that. Your expenses should be fairly predictable. Once in a while, things happen, but the longer you have the same tenant in the property, the more that they're going to be in tune with what's happening on the property, and so you'll get a lot of heads up. You can manage how they're maintaining things like changing air filters. As an example, right? That's one way to preserve, especially here in the desert, that's one way to preserve your air conditioners to make sure that your tenant's changing the air filters once per month. So just little things like that you'll be able to get some control around.